Hi, this is Dr. Claire, and this is our second lecture on plant diversity. In this lecture, we're going to cover the seed plants. So the seed plants are the most common plants that are alive today. The vast majority of plants that you see out there are some kind of seed plants. And the seed plants are divided into two major groups, the gymnosperms and the angiosperms. So the gymnosperms are things like conifers, ginkgos, cycads, and the angiosperms are the flowering plants. So we're going to go through each of these, and then we're going to break down the angiosperms a little bit more because the angiosperms are the largest group of plants. All right, so within the gymnosperms, you have things like the conifers. Conifers are probably your most well-known gymnosperm plant. Those are going to include things like pines, spruces, firs, cedars, redwood trees. The tallest living plant is the coastal redwood tree, so that's a type of conifer. The oldest known plant is the bristlecone pine. They can be thousands of years old. So they've actually found some bristlecone pines that are about 3,000 years old, which is pretty dang impressive. Conifers tend to be very tolerant of dry and cold environments. So we have a lot of conifers here in Colorado, up on our mountains, where the environment is often quite dry and quite cold. So all of our spruce fir forests and pine forests that we have here, all of those are conifers. Okay. Cycads are kind of a weird group. They look like a palm tree, but they're not a palm tree. Palm trees are a flowering plant, so they actually have flowers and fruits. Cycads do not. Cycads have cones. So they produce a male cone and a female cone. The female cones can weigh up to 100 pounds. And one thing that's kind of cool about cycads is they produce the largest sperm of any organism on the planet. The sperm is about the size of a grain of table salt. So that means that you can actually see cycad sperm with the naked eye. You do not need a microscope to see cycad sperm. So that's kind of crazy. Ginkgos are another gymnosperm. Ginkgos only have one remaining living species as Ginkgo biloba. They do have one thing that's kind of cool about them is that they have separate male and female trees. They're often used as a street tree because they're really quite beautiful. They have very nicely shaped green leaves during the summer, and then they turn this beautiful yellow in the fall. So they're really commonly used because they are quite lovely. However, city planners try to plant only male trees because the female trees produce these cones that have a fleshy exterior that smells like poop. And so when they, well, I think it smells like poop. Some people will tell you it smells like rancid butter. But so when the cones are mature, they drop off the tree and people step on them and it's really kind of gross. I actually lived somewhere where there was a female ginkgo tree and it wasn't very pleasant to walk under in the fall because of that. So most of the ginkgo trees that are planted now are male trees. The angiosperms are the largest and most diverse group of plants. There's a number of different groups within the angiosperms. There's the water lilies and the magnolias and things like that. I'm not going to go into too much detail about some of these smaller groups. Most angiosperms do fall into two larger groups, though, the monocots and the eudicots. Almost... let's see, what is it? 98% of plants of the angiosperms are either a monocot or a eudicot. So we're going to talk a little bit more about those two groups. The angiosperms are, of course, the flowering plants. So that's one trait that is similar among all of these plants is that they all have flowers and they all have fruits. Okay? So if you're trying to determine whether a plant is a monocot or a eudicot, there are some traits that you can use to tell them apart. The names monocot and eudicot come from the number of embryonic leaves that are present in the seed. A monocot, mono is one, cot, the word for an embryonic leaf is a cotyledon. So you could call a monocot, if you want to, you could call it a monocotyledonous plant, but it's easier to say monocot. So what that monocot means is one embryonic leaf. Okay, so that's one way to tell. Some examples of monocots are things like grasses. So we use a lot of grasses for food, wheat, rice, barley, oats. All of these are grasses. They're all monocots. Also the lilies, tulips, daffodils, all of those are monocots as well. All right, and all of those things are going to have just one embryonic leaf in the seed. The eudicots, the di in there means two. Cot is for cotyledon again, the embryonic leaf. And then eu means new. So the dicots used to be a different group, and then they had to rearrange it based on some new information, and so they changed the name to eudicot, meaning new to cotyledonous leaf. So now they're the eudicots. They have 2 embryonic leaves in each seed, and most of the plants, about 75% of seed plants, are in that group, in the eudicots. So those are going to include things like peas and carrots and oak trees and roses and peaches and a whole bunch of other very common plants. Okay, so those are the 2 major groups. All right, if you look at some other traits of these plants, there's some other ways to tell them apart. Monocots generally have their petals in their flowers in multiples of 3. So if you look at the flower and it's got 3 petals or 6 petals, chances are good that you are looking at a monocot. If you're looking at a flower and it has multiples of 4 or 5, then you're looking at a eudicot. Also, if you look at the pollen of the plant, monocots have a simple pollen with either 1 pore or furrow, and eudicots have a much more complex looking pollen with multiple pores and furrows on the pollen grain. So you can actually look at the pollen under an electron microscope and tell what kind of plant it came from as well. If you look at the vascular tissue of monocots and eudicots, it is a little bit different as well. Within the leaves, monocot leaves have veins that run parallel to each other. So if you think about a grass blade, there's all those little lines that are running parallel. That is a monocot leaf. Eudicots have netted veins. So think about a maple leaf. It's got veins that branch off and interconnect, and that's a netted structure. So that's how you know that it's a eudicot. Also, if you look at the vascular tissue in the stems, monocots tend to have the vascular tissue kind of scattered everywhere in a bunch of different places, whereas the eudicots tend to have their vascular tissue arranged in a ring. Okay, and so if you think about it, most of the angiosperm trees are going to be eudicots because you have to have that ring of vascular cambium in order to make wood and have that lateral growth. So the vast majority of woody plants are actually eudicots as well. Okay, that's it for the seed plants. I'll catch you next time.